Good morning again, brethren. We continue our What is Needed for Salvation, identification of verses, Genesis to Revelations. Today we are on Judges chapters 17 to 18. I've titled it 20 years wages for an idol, because that is what was paid to acquire an idol, as we shall see. I shall firstly read the verses, certain verses, and then comment on any relevant ones that has anything to do with what God requires of us. The story of Micah and the Levite, reading from Judges chapter 17 verse 1. And there was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said unto his mother, the 1100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursedest and spokest of, also in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be thou of Yahweh my son. And when he had restored the 1100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver unto Yahweh from my hand for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will restore it unto thee. Verse 4. Yet he restored the money unto his mother, and his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the founder, who made thereof a graven image and a molten image, and they were in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had an house of gods, and an ephod, and a teraphim, and consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. Verse 6. And in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. My comment. Micah was of Israel's tribe of Ephraim. Idolatry has similarities to Yahweh's worship system, i.e. a priest. Remember Genesis chapters 41 verse 5, which says, and Aaron, stating it was an idol god that brought them out of Egypt, in Exodus chapters 32 verse 4. Returning now to the chapter 17 verse 7. And there was a young man of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. Jump to verse 10. And Micah said unto him, Dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest. And I will give thee 10 shekels of silver by the year, or for the year, and a suit of apparel, and thy victuals. Verse 12. And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Verse 13. Then said Micah, Now know I that Yahweh will do me good, seeing I have a Levite as my priest. My comment. The idol cost 200 shekels of silver. We are not told in what month of the year the priest came to Micah, but he was to get 10 shekels at the end of the year, or per year. Was it 10? I can't remember if it's 10. If per year, that is 20 years' wages for an idol. Micah knew of Yahweh's priestly system, yet chose to follow idolatry. He later thought having a Levite priest would bring him God's favour. Same with many Christians today. They know things like Christmas are not of Yahweh, and God's Passover has been replaced with Easter, the worship of the god Ishtar. They use their own eyes and understanding to think that it be acceptable to God, and think it is excusable to Yahweh. Many also think that going to church, having a Levite in their eyes, being good, would bring them God's favour, despite what they are doing or what they believe. This is incorrect. The person who sins and does not repent dies. We read this in Luke chapters 13 verse 3 and 5. A priest or pastor cannot save, neither anyone's prayers for you after you are dead. So you must do your own works in this lifetime. Okay, continuing to Judges 18 verse 1. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. For unto that day all their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. And the children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from their coast, men of valor, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said unto them, Go, search the land. Who, when they came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. Verse 3. When they were by the house of Micah, they knew the voice of the young man and the Levite, and they turned in thither and said unto him, Who brought thee hither? And what makest thou in this place, and what thou doest here? So here we have, they come and saw in Micah's house the Levite priest, and basically asking him, what is he doing there? Who brought him there? And so on. Verse 14. Then answered the 5 men that went to spy out the country of Laish, and said unto their brethren, Do you know that there is in these houses an ephod, and a teraphim, and a graven image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you have to do. And they turned thitherward, and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, even unto the house of Micah, and saluted him. Verse 17. And the 5 men that went to spy out the land went up and came in there, and took the graven image, and the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image, and the priest stood in the entering of the gate, with the 600 men that were appointed with weapons of war. And verse 18. And these went into Micah's house, and fetched the carved image, and ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. Then said the priest unto them, What do you? And they said unto him, Hold thy peace, lay thy hand upon thy mouth, and go with us, and be to us a father and a priest. It is better for thee to be a priest unto the house of one man. Is it better for thee to be a priest unto one man, or that thou be a priest unto a tribe and a family in Israel? And the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image, and went in the midst of the people. So the Levite was doing his services, even though he knew it was wrong, for money, rather than doing what was right. For serving in the forest system of Micah. Chapter 18, verse 27. And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priests which he had, and came unto Laish, unto a people that were at quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and burnt the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Zidon, and they had no business with any man. And it was in the valley that lieth by Beth-rehob. And they built a city and dwelt therein. Verse 29. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father. After the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Lachish at the beginning, at first. Verse 30. And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan the son of Jeshim, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan, until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set them up Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So here we see there's no king to rule them, and they're basically doing false worship, mixing it in with God's way, calling it God's system, but yet it is not of God. So we have the right people, Israel, the right leader, a Levite priest with ephod, the right place, the house of God, yet the wrong practice of idolatry. Many Christian denominations started by a person about 100 or so years ago, the Protestant denominations, teaching themselves, have also been like Micah, using their own eyes to worship God rather than his commandments. Instead of letting the law of Moses or laws of Moses be their guide, as it says in Acts 15:21, and teacher as God instituted, they have adopted traditions of men. Acts chapters 15:21 and Luke 2:32 tells us how we should be doing it, learning from the laws of God. And if we read Acts chapter 7 verse 38, it says the laws of God, or the church of the wilderness, is the same laws or oracles that should be passed on and followed by the New Testament church. The Catholics have idols of Mary, Stations of the Cross, etc. The Pentecostal have teachings of founder Charles Parham. Adventists of William Miller or Ellen G. White. Jehovah's Witness of Charles Russell. We are all meant to be reading the same Bible and have the same faith, same baptism and same God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Yet these founders of modern day Protestant denominations have made up their own way and called it God's way. The Bible calls them sect of the Nazarenes in the Bible, what Paul practiced, and the apostles, who kept the commandments of Yahweh God and faith in his son Yeshua. Acts 24 verse 5 says, "For we have found this man a pestilent fellow, and a mover of a sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." In other words, they were a Jewish sect, just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, but with the belief of the Messiah from Nazareth, Yeshua of Nazareth. So they're called a sect, a Jewish sect, of the Nazarenes, as an identification of what they followed. In Revelation chapters 14 verse 12, we read you're supposed to keep the commandments of God and the faith of Yeshua, not just one. In Revelation 22:14, we read those who do the commandments of God have a right to enter into the city. And we read also in Revelation 12:17, again, there's two criteria, the commandments of God and the faith in Yeshua. This is what Paul became. Paul had the commandments of God following when he stoned Stephen. I thought he was being zealous for the law. But then he also, on the road to Damascus, was blinded to show that the persecution of the new believers in the Messiah were actually following the prophecies that God had ordained, that he would send a Messiah from amongst brethren like Moses. So many of us may have to go back to the beginning of the Bible and start again, which is what I try and do with these annual studies of Genesis to Revelations, rather than starting with what denominations have inherited and teach us. That may be okay for a starting point to bring us to learn the Bibles, but then we may have to come out of them, as it says in Revelations, and go back to the commandments of God and the faith of Yeshua. We may not necessarily have to change a lot, maybe the days of worship, and also obedience to the commandments of God, all of them, not just the do not kill, do not murder, and the so-called 10 Commandments. We may already have the love and faith of the Messiah and only need to add the commandments of God, which includes the holy days of Leviticus chapters 23. They're not Jewish, as it says in verse 2, they are God's. Adding Leviticus 23 means getting rid of the pagan ones like Christmas and Easter and so on. Do not mix like the Danites above that led them into captivity. Soon it would be Mother's Day, unless already past, when they not sure what I did a typing error there. So unless it's already passed upon when this was posted. A pagan holiday in worship of a pagan god, not mothers, as a deceiver has sold it. Note how the clocks went back last night, or according to what year you're reading this message, the clocks may still be going back. In 2017 is when this message was written, or will or has been changed soon in other years to come. And my point is, the clocks go back to signify it is connected with the season when the daylight becomes lighter, and you're actually working something, a god associated with Mother Earth, as they call it, not your biological mother. It celebrates the ushering in of spring. If you search YouTube for the pagan origins of Mother's Day, you should get some information. If we are to be born of the Spirit and worship in spirit and truth, we should not be keeping these days. Participate in them, nor encourage our children, husbands, etc. to honour them, even though you may feel good when they give you flowers and all those kind of things. It is wrong. In 2018, the clocks go back next week. It is not coincidence. It is around Easter time, to the god Ishtar, all associated with pagan season worship. So the Bible says, in vain do they worship me, keeping the traditions of men. We must return to worshipping God in spirit and in truth, in believing in Yeshua, the Messiah, and in keeping his commandments. Shalom until tomorrow's studies, God willing.